Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The evening sky of Myron 3 burned crimson as Carla pressed her forehead against each of her offsprings in the traditional farewell. Her throat sacs quivered with emotion she dared not express. The eldest, Teth, stood tallest, his eye membranes blinking rapidly to hold back moisture. The twins, Ren and Pal, clung to her lower limbs, too young to fully comprehend what was happening. "Only 10 cycles," Kayla whispered, her translator rendering the clicks and whistles of her native tongue into standard galactic speech. "You will be cared for by Elder Rune until my contract ends." "But Mother," Teth protested, his thin frame trembling, "the others who sign with Vorex never return." Kyla stroked his head crest, now beginning to show the first signs of adulthood. "Those are stories. I have signed the proper documents. The corporation needs workers and they pay well." She did not mention the rumors, that Mirans were worked until their bodies failed, that the 10-cycle contracts were designed to outlast her species' natural lifespan under such conditions. Such thoughts were luxury she could not afford, not, with her mate gone 3 seasons now, crushed beneath the weight of a collapsed mineral shaft, leaving her with 3 hungry mouths and a dwelling in arrears. "The first payment has already been transferred," she continued, gesturing to Elder Rune, who stood respectfully distant. "Your schooling is secured, your daily meals, your medical needs." Ren looked up, her small voice barely registering on the translator. "Will you call us through the stars?" "Whenever permitted," Kayla promised, knowing the corporation's communication policies were notoriously restrictive. "And I will send messages with every payment." The distant horn of the transport ship echoed across the settlement. 50 other Mirans were making the same choice today, selling their labor to feed those they loved. Their species had been space-capable for barely 3 generations, too late to claim worthy status in the galactic hierarchy. They were newcomers, relegated to providing what the elder species needed most: disposable labor. Kayla lifted her travel pack, everything she was permitted to bring contained in one small bundle. The corporation would provide all necessary accommodations, the contract had stated. She had signed without reading the microscopic text that followed. "Be strong," she told her children. "Honor our ancestors. Remember the songs of our people." As she walked toward the waiting transport, Teth called after her, his voice breaking, "Mother, I will come find you when I am grown." She did not turn back. She could not. But her inner heart, the one organ unique to Mirans that gave them their legendary endurance, clenched with both sorrow and fierce resolve. They would survive. Her children would have opportunity. That was what mattered. The transport's loading ramp extended like a metal tongue, ready to swallow her whole. Overhead, the stars were emerging as Myron 3's sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere among those distant lights lay her destination, Vorex Station, where she would labor to fulfill her contract. As the ship's doors sealed behind her, Kayla allowed herself one moment of weakness, one silent sob that shook her slender frame. Then, tucking away her grief like the precious heirloom it was, she straightened her posture and moved forward into the crowded hold where her new life awaited. Vorex Station hung in the void like an enormous mechanical spider, its central hub surrounded by 8 massive processing arms that perpetually devoured raw materials from nearby asteroid fields. Kayla pressed against the small viewport as the transport approached, her translator silent without any companions nearby to converse with. The 50 Mirans who had boarded with her were now scattered throughout the ship in separate processing chambers. The docking procedure took nearly a full rotation, the transport waiting its turn among dozens of similar vessels. When the airlock finally opened, Carla was met not with the promised orientation guide, but with atmosphere so thick with industrial particulates that her breathing filters activated automatically. "Form a line, single file, move quickly." The voice belonged to a Drav supervisor, his exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lighting. His manipulator claws clicked impatiently as the new arrivals shuffled forward. "Registration designation?" he demanded when Kayla reached him. "Carla of Clan Veris from Myron 3, she answered with dignity. The Drav made a sound approximating laughter. "Not anymore. You are Unit 4729. Memorize it. Respond to it. Your previous identity is irrelevant to your function. Her scanner passed over her body, cataloguing her biometrics before a work badge was roughly attached to her outer membrane. The material stung where it adhered to her sensitive skin. Processing Level 8, Section 12, the Drav instructed. Follow the yellow markers. Deviate and your contract penalties activate. Kayla joined the stream of new workers moving through the station's utilitarian corridors. The air grew heavier with each passing minute, laden with the byproducts of whatever Vorex extracted from the raw materials they processed. Her species was particularly valued for their ability to withstand toxic environments, a trait that now seemed more curse than blessing. Processing Level 8 was a nightmare of industrial chaos. Enormous machines crushed, separated, and refined materials, while workers of various species tended to tasks deemed too delicate or unpredictable for automation. The noise assaulted Kayla's sensitive auditory membranes, and she quickly adjusted her biological filters to dampen the worst of it. 4729. A voice cut through her discomfort. Another Drav, smaller than the first but no less intimidating, approached. You're assigned to filtration maintenance, 12-hour shifts. Quarters assignment follows completion of your first rotation. Training consisted of watching a series of projected images demonstrating the cleaning of massive filtration systems. No safety equipment was offered beyond what her species naturally possessed. The filters, she quickly realized, contained concentrations of radioactive particles and caustic chemicals that would kill most sentient beings within hours of exposure. That night, crammed into a sleeping pod barely large enough for her frame, Kayla composed her first message home using the rudimentary terminal provided for worker privileges. My beloved offspring, the work is steady, the accommodations adequate. My first payment will transfer as scheduled. Study well. Honor our traditions. I carry your memory in my inner heart. Mother. She did not mention the caustic burns already forming on her limbs, nor the 3 Mirans who had collapsed during their first shift and been dragged away by security drones. She did not tell them about the meager nutrition packets that left her constantly hungry, or the water rations insufficient to maintain her species' moisture requirements. Instead, she transferred 1/3 of her first day's earnings to Elder, Rune's account for her children's care, keeping only what the company would deem sufficient for personal maintenance expenditures. As mandatory rest period commenced and the lights dimmed in the worker quarters, Carla noticed something unusual, a maintenance worker passing through the corridor outside. Unlike the Drav supervisors or the corporate executives glimpsed from afar, this figure moved with a different bearing. The worker paused, seeming to sense Kayla's observation, and turned. It was her first glimpse of a human, a species she had only heard about in recent transmissions from home. Their kind were newcomers to the galactic community, even more recent than Mirans, yet somehow they had avoided the bottom rung of the hierarchical ladder. The human's eyes met hers briefly before they continued down the corridor. Something in that momentary connection left Kayla with an unfamiliar sensation, one her people had almost forgotten in their generations of servitude: hope. 87 days into her contract, Kayla's inner heart began showing signs of strain. The constant exposure to Vorex Station's toxic environment was taking its toll despite her species' legendary resilience. Her work quota had increased twice already, while her nutrition allowance remained unchanged. During filtration cleaning, she now struggled to reach the higher access panels that once posed no difficulty. It was during one such struggle that disaster struck. Balancing precariously on an unauthorized maintenance step she had fashioned from discarded materials, Kayla stretched to reach a particularly contaminated filter. Her limb gave way, sending her crashing to the deck. Pain lanced through her left side as the sound of cracking exoskeleton echoed in the chamber. Injury meant replacement. Replacement meant contract violation. Violation meant no further payments to her children. Dragging herself to a secluded maintenance alcove, Carla desperately tried to assess the damage. 2 of her 4 manipulator limbs were certainly fractured, possibly beyond her body's ability to self-repair without proper medical treatment, treatment the corporation would deem economically unjustifiable for a common laborer. You need help, the voice startled her. The human maintenance worker she had glimpsed months ago stood at the entrance to the alcove, tool case in hand. Up close, the differences between their species were even more pronounced. The human's soft exterior seemed impossibly vulnerable compared to her own protective membranes. I am functional, Kayla insisted, struggling to rise. The quota must be met. Not with those fractures. The human approached cautiously. I'm Ellis. I work environmental systems maintenance. I can help. Help equals interference. Interference equals contract violation. Kayla recited the regulation automatically. Ellis smiled, a curious expression that Kayla's translator couldn't properly interpret. Only if reported. From the tool case came medical supplies clearly not authorized for maintenance personnel. Your species is Miran, correct? I've studied your physiology. Against every corporate directive, Carla allowed the human to treat her injuries. Ellis worked with surprising gentleness, applying a regenerative compound to the fractures and binding them with a flexible, supportive material. Why would you risk punishment? Carla asked as Ellis finished the treatment. Because it's wrong what they're doing here. The human's voice dropped lower. On Earth, this kind of labor practice has been outlawed for centuries. Earth is your homeworld? Ellis nodded. Humans are new to interstellar society, but we brought some old ideas with us. One being that sentient beings shouldn't be treated as disposable resources. Over the next rotation, Ellis returned several times to check on Kayla's healing progress. Each visit brought new information, stories about human society, their rapid rise from planetary civilization to spacefaring species, their confrontational stance toward practices other galactic powers considered standard. Your people challenged the established order? Carla asked during one such conversation, her translator struggling to convey her amazement. We have a history of it, Ellis confirmed. When humans first encountered galactic society, we were expected to take our place at the bottom, just like Mirans. We refused. How could you refuse the elder species? By demonstrating that cooperation yields better results than exploitation, and by being stubborn. Ellis smiled again, and this time Carla thought she understood the expression better. Some called it our greatest flaw, but it might be our greatest strength. As weeks passed and her injuries healed, Carla found herself looking forward to these forbidden conversations. Ellis explained that humans had secured a unique position in galactic politics through a combination of diplomatic skill, technological innovation, and what he called moral stubbornness. They simply refused to accept certain practices, even when told they were millennia-old traditions. But why help me? Kayla finally asked one cycle, after Ellis had smuggled in nutrient supplements specifically formulated for Miran physiology. I am nothing in this station's operation, because to humans there is no such thing as nothing when it comes to thinking beings. Ellis's expression grew serious, and because I'm not just a maintenance worker, I'm documenting what happens here. For the first time since arriving at Vorex Station, Carla felt something dangerous spark within her inner heart, something she thought had been extinguished by necessity and survival. Dignity. Evidence must be irrefutable, Ellis explained, voice barely above a whisper as they huddled in the rarely used atmospheric cycling chamber. Vorex operates in legal gray areas, exploiting differences between various planetary codes. Carla watched as the human's fingers danced across a concealed datapad, displaying complex legal documents. 6 months had passed since their first encounter, and what began as simple medical aid had evolved into something far more dangerous. Earth's Sentient Rights Commission needs documented proof of contract violations, Ellis continued. Forced. Quota increases without compensation adjustments, inadequate medical care, prohibited exposure to toxic elements, physical abuse by supervisors. Carla had witnessed all these things and worse. Just last cycle, a Miran worker, Unit 8931, had died after prolonged exposure to radioactive filtration components. The body was simply processed as organic waste, the worker's identification recycled to a new arrival. I can access areas you cannot, Kayla offered. My species' natural adaptations allow me to enter toxic zones without raising suspicion. Ellis shook his head. It's too dangerous if they catch you. My contract has 7 cycles remaining, Carla interrupted. At current deterioration rates, my body will fail before completion. My children will receive nothing once I can no longer work. The human fell silent, clearly wrestling with ethical concerns that seemed uniquely human. Other species Carla had encountered in her life accepted the universe's inherent unfairness as immutable law. Humans alone seemed to rage against it. There's something else you should know, Ellis finally said. I've been monitoring communications to Myron 3. Elder Rune passed away 3 weeks ago. Kayla's inner heart contracted painfully. My children? Currently, housed in state facilities, separated. The payments continue to reach them, but their situation is precarious. For several moments, Carla could not speak. Her translator hung silent around her neck while her native language failed her entirely. When she finally found words, they emerged with clarity that surprised even her. Then we have no choice but to succeed. What followed was an intricate operation of information gathering. Carla used her maintenance access to place Ellis's microscopic recording devices throughout the station. She documented safety violations, recorded supervisor abuses, copied unauthorized contract modifications. Each piece of evidence was carefully encrypted and stored in Ellis's hidden server. Other workers began to notice their activities, despite their caution. A Talesian fluid technician named Moore offered to help, providing access codes to restricted areas. A pair of Velian brothers who operated the waste reclamation system began reporting violations they witnessed. Slowly, a network formed within Vorex Station, a silent resistance that left no trace but gathered damning evidence with each passing day. The corporation monitors all standard communications, Ellis warned during one meeting, but I've modified this transmitter to piggyback on their own security signals. The device he offered was tiny, designed to fit within Kayla's natural breathing cavity, where station scanners would register it as normal biological matter. With it, she could finally send a real message to her children, not the sanitized, corporation-approved text she'd been limited to thus far. That night, hidden in her sleeping pod, Carla recorded her true experiences for her offspring. She told them of the conditions, of her declining health, but also of hope, of the human who believed in something better and the possibility that their mother might return to them not just alive, but victorious. As the resistance network grew, so did the risks. Security drones appeared in previously unmonitored sections. Random inspections of worker quarters increased. Ellis reported that his official maintenance credentials were being questioned more frequently. We're making them nervous, he explained during a hurried meeting in a radiation shadow, where sensors couldn't penetrate. The evidence compilation is nearly complete. When the diplomatic vessel arrives next month for its scheduled inspection, I'll transfer everything. Will it be enough? Kayla asked. It has to be, Ellis replied, and Kayla recognized the expression that humans called determination. Because something bigger is happening. Reports from other facilities show similar resistance. Networks forming. It's not just us anymore. For the first time in many cycles, Carla allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival. A future where she might hold her children again, where Teth wouldn't need to fulfill his promise to find her because she would return to him instead. The key warning klaxon that disrupted this moment of hope was their first indication that everything was about to change. The alarm ceased abruptly, leaving an eerie silence throughout Level 8. Kayla and Ellis exchanged glances in their hidden meeting place. Such interruptions were uncommon on Vorex Station, where production continued relentlessly regardless of circumstances. Security alert, Ellis whispered, checking a concealed monitor. Not an environmental breach. Kayla's breathing membranes fluttered anxiously. They found something. Before Ellis could respond, the station-wide announcement system activated. Attention all personnel. Unauthorized communication detected in Section 12. Security protocols engaged. All units return to assigned quarters for identification. Verification. Someone talked, Ellis hissed, gathering his equipment with practiced speed. The evidence is hidden where they won't find it, Kayla assured him. Go now. Separate routes. They parted ways at the access junction, Ellis heading toward maintenance corridors, while Kyla took the more visible route toward worker quarters. She had nearly reached her designated section when a security drone intercepted her. Unit 4729, halt for inspection. Kayla froze as the drone scanned her, its sensors penetrating her outer membranes. For one terrible moment, she feared it would detect the communications device hidden within her breathing cavity. But the scan completed, without incident. Proceed to quarters, the drone instructed, moving on to the next worker. It was only when Kayla entered the cramped sleeping chamber that she understood what had happened. Unit 6318, a Miran who had recently joined their resistance network, was being dragged away by Drav security officers. His eye membranes locked with Kayla's for one shameful moment before he was pulled from the room. Example made, announced the lead Drav. Collaborator with human interference identified. Return to normal operations. That night brought no rest. Security patrols passed through worker quarters hourly. Kayla lay motionless in her pod, breathing shallowly to avoid detection of her hidden transmitter. Her thoughts raced between concern for Ellis and fear for their mission. Had the betrayal compromised everything? How much did 6318 reveal under interrogation? The answer came with the dawn cycle. As workers assembled for shift, assignment, the executive administrator, a Vex rarely seen on the processing levels, addressed them through video projection. Attention units. Human national Ellis Ramirez has been detained for industrial espionage and contractual interference. Any unit found to have collaborated with this individual will have their contracts terminated without compensation, with full penalties applied. Images appeared on the screen. Surveillance footage showing Ellis meeting with various workers, including clear visuals of his interactions with Kayla. The administrator continued. The human claims to represent an Earth organization investigating labor practices. Such investigations violate Vorex Corporation's sovereign operating rights under Galactic Commercial Code. Kayla felt the stares of fellow workers, some accusing, others frightened. The resistance network they had built now seemed hopelessly exposed. Without Ellis, without the planned evidence transfer to the diplomatic vessel, everything they had risked was for nothing. When she reported to her filtration assignment that day, Kayla found herself isolated. Former allies avoided her gaze. Even more, the Talesian, who had become something almost like a friend, kept his distance. Only the Velian brothers showed any sign of continued solidarity, brushing against her limbs briefly as they passed in the corridors, their species' subtle sign of support. 3 days passed without word of Ellis. Kayla maintained her work performance precisely at quota requirements, neither exceeding nor falling short, to avoid drawing additional attention. Each night she attempted to access their hidden communication channels without success. Station security had implemented new scanning protocols that made movement between sections nearly impossible without authorization. On the 4th night after Ellis's capture, Kayla was awakened by a barely perceptible vibration from the transmitter. Hidden within her breathing cavity, a message encoded in the simplest binary pattern, Cell Level 4, Emergency Protocol Alpha. The message could only have come from Ellis or someone using his equipment. Cell Level 4 was the station's detention area, restricted, heavily guarded and reportedly equipped with interrogation facilities that circumvented galactic regulations on treatment of sentience. Emergency Protocol Alpha had been their final contingency plan, one they had discussed but hoped never to implement. It meant that all was discovered, that there was nothing left to preserve except the evidence itself. Kayla rose from her sleeping pod with quiet determination. Around her, other workers remained in deep rest cycles, exhausted from increased quotas, implemented as punishment for the human interference. Using techniques Ellis had taught her, she disabled the quarter's motion sensors long enough to slip into the maintenance access tunnel. Station security was concentrated on intersections and lift shafts, but Ellis had mapped ancient maintenance paths dating back to the station's original construction. Many were hazardous, lacking proper environmental controls or structural integrity, but they remained unmonitored precisely because of these dangers. As Kayla navigated these forgotten passages, her inner heart pounded with fear and resolve. If Ellis had been forced to invoke Protocol Alpha, it meant their immediate mission had failed. But the final objective, exposing Vorex's violations to galactic authorities, could still succeed if she reached their hidden data cache and found a way to transmit it independently. What she discovered in cell level 4, however, changed everything. Through a ventilation grate, she witnessed Ellis battered, bloodied, but somehow still defiant, facing not station security, but representatives from his own species. The Earth Diplomatic Corps cannot officially sanction your activities. One human in formal attire was saying, "You've violated multiple jurisdictional protocols." "They're enslaving sentience," Ellis rasped through swollen lips. "Your protocols are meaningless if they enable this. We're negotiating improved conditions through proper channels," the diplomat insisted. Ellis laughed bitterly. "While workers die every cycle, while children are orphaned because their parents' bodies give out from toxic exposure, I've documented everything. It's hidden where they'll never find it. Vorex Corporation has threatened to suspend all trade agreements with Earth systems if these allegations become public," the diplomat warned. "Millions of lives depend on those resources, and millions of lives are being destroyed to extract them," Ellis countered. What Kayla witnessed was a conflict not between species, but between philosophies, between pragmatic acceptance of an unjust system and principled rejection of it. In that moment, she recognized that humans were not monolithic saviors, but beings as complex and contradictory as any species, and she knew what she had to do. The human diplomatic vessel, Equitable Measure, maintained stationary orbit 5,000 kilometers from Vorex Station, close enough for official communications, but distant enough to avoid violating corporate space. Captain Linadera stood before the main view screen, her dark features set in what her crew recognized as her negotiation expression. "Once again, Administrator Vex, I must insist on speaking with our detained citizen." The administrator's translated voice carried appropriate tones of regret. "As I've explained, Captain, your Ellis Ramirez is being held on serious charges of industrial espionage. Vorex Corporation is within its legal rights to conduct a thorough investigation before permitting outside contact." Lynn had been playing this diplomatic dance for 3 days, ever since receiving an encrypted emergency beacon from Ellis's final transmission. As a covert operative for the Earth Sentient Rights Commission, he had been embedded on Vorex Station for nearly a standard year. His last report had indicated a significant breakthrough, and then silence. "Administrator, Earth respects corporate sovereignty," Lynn continued, following the script that bored her but served a purpose. Each communication extended the connection between the vessels, allowing her tech specialists more time to work. However, basic rights of representation apply to all citizens under Galactic Accord, Section 1347. While this conversation occupied the administrator, elsewhere on the diplomatic vessel, communications specialist Tomas Verde monitored a faint signal emanating from the station. A signal utilizing Earth military encryption protocols that hadn't been used in decades. "Captain's going to want to see this," he muttered, transferring the decryption to a secure terminal. The message that appeared shocked him to his core. "Human diplomatic vessel, evidence of extensive rights violations attached. Earth citizen Ellis Ramirez being tortured in cell level 4. Station management aware of investigation. Resistance network compromised. Request immediate intervention under Galactic Sentient Protection Act." Most shocking wasn't the content, but the attached files, thousands of documented violations, recorded conversations, medical scans of injured workers, and corporate directives, explicitly ordering the concealment of safety hazards. Most shocking of all was the sender, a non-human designated only as Unit 4729. Within 20 minutes, the Equitable Measures diplomatic posture transformed. Captain Lynn addressed Administrator Vex with new authority in her voice. "Under authority granted by the Galactic Council's emergency provisions, the Earth Diplomatic Corps hereby invokes inspection rights, as outlined in the Sentient Protection Act of Galactic Date 73412. The administrator's membrane colors shifted rapidly, a sign of agitation his translator couldn't disguise. "This is unprecedented. We have no obligation to—" "The evidence justifying this inspection has already been filed with the Galactic Council," Lynn interrupted. The peacekeeping vessel has been dispatched. You may comply with our inspection team now, or face a full enforcement action when they arrive. Your choice, Administrator. Faced with this ultimatum, Vorex Corporation made a strategic decision to appear cooperative while buying time to eliminate evidence. They permitted a small inspection team to shuttle across to the station while emergency purges of incriminating data began throughout their systems. What they hadn't anticipated was that the inspection team included specialists trained specifically for this scenario. While corporate representatives led them on a carefully choreographed tour of worker accommodations, temporarily improved for their visit, two team members quietly separated, following coordinates provided in 4729's transmission. Carla was waiting for them in the abandoned processing chamber, her body showing signs of severe physiological stress, but her inner heart steady with purpose. Ellis Ramirez is scheduled for removal, she informed them without preamble. They call it processing. It means his body will be destroyed with industrial waste. When? Demanded security specialist Amara West. Next shift rotation, 6 hours by your measurement. Amara exchanged glances with her partner. That's not enough time for the peacekeeping vessel to arrive. We don't need it, Kayla replied. I can access the cell level through maintenance tunnels. Your credentials can override the final security protocols. That's not the diplomatic approach, Amara's partner objected. Diplomacy failed, Ellis, Kayla stated simply. It fails all of us every day. What followed was an operation that would later be classified in Earth records for nearly a century. Using Kayla's intimate knowledge of the station's hidden passages, the human specialists infiltrated the detention level. They located Ellis, barely conscious, his body bearing evidence of interrogation methods outlawed throughout civilized space. You should have waited for the diplomatic vessel, Ellis murmured, as they extracted him from his cell. A friend couldn't. Wait, Amara told him, nodding toward Carla, who stood watch at the corridor junction. Their escape route was compromised halfway to the rendezvous point when station alarms activated. Security drones converged from multiple directions, forcing them into increasingly hazardous areas of the station. Kayla led them through toxic processing zones where her natural adaptations protected her, but the humans had to rely on emergency breathing apparatus. The administrator will never let you leave with those files, Ellis warned as they paused in a radiation shadow. They'll destroy the whole station before allowing exposure. As if summoned by his words, a tremendous shudder ran through the station's superstructure. Emergency containment doors began sealing throughout the complex. What's happening? Amara demanded, checking her scanner. Kayla's translator struggled to keep pace with her rapid speech. Core overload protocol. They're purging evidence by simulating catastrophic failure. Simulating? Ellis questioned sharply. The safeguards are disengaged, Carla confirmed. The simulation will become reality within hours. On the diplomatic vessel, Captain Lin watched in horror as Vorex Station's reactor readings spiked dangerously. They're going to sacrifice the entire station, she realized, with thousands of workers still aboard. The diplomatic rulebook had just been incinerated along with Vorex's reactor safeguards. Lin opened an emergency broadcast on all frequencies. Attention. All personnel on Vorex Station. This is Captain Lin Adira of the Earth Vessel Equitable Measure. Station management has initiated critical system failures. This is not a drill. Proceed immediately to evacuation points. All Earth vessels in the E sector are responding with rescue operations. Throughout the station, confused workers looked up from their tasks as the captain's words were translated into dozens of languages. For many, the concept of evacuation was foreign. Their contracts made no provisions for emergency departure. Processing Level 8, Moore the Talesian made a decision. This way, he announced to his fellow workers. The human message is true. Follow me to the shuttle bays. Across the station, similar scenes unfolded as the resistance network Ellis and Kayla had built emerged from hiding, leading their fellow workers toward salvation. Alarms wailed through Vorex Station's corridors as the reactor core temperature continued to rise. Emergency lighting cast crimson shadows across panicked faces of workers who had never been trained for evacuation procedures. Station management had already departed on private vessels, leaving security protocols engaged and escape pods locked down. Carla felt the vibrations through her sensitive limbs before the first explosion rocked the lower processing levels. Structural integrity was failing faster than predicted, a deliberate act by Vorex Corporation to ensure maximum destruction of evidence. "We need to reach the workers," Ellis insisted, though he could barely stand without support. "They won't know how to override the evacuation protocols." "My team can handle that," Amara assured him. "Our priority is getting you and this evidence to safety." Kayla's translator struggled to keep pace with their rapid exchange, but she understood the fundamental conflict. Ellis wouldn't leave thousands behind, regardless of his condition or the importance of the evidence they carried. "I know another way," Kayla interjected, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles with newfound authority. "The maintenance network connects all levels. We can access the central communication hub and override the lockdowns." The humans exchanged glances, clearly weighing the risk against potential rewards. Thousands of lives hung in the balance, Mirans, Talasians, Velians, and dozens of other species deemed expendable by corporation standards. "Lead the way," Ellis finally nodded, wincing as the movement sent fresh pain through his injured body. Kayla guided them through increasingly unstable passages as the station's superstructure continued to deteriorate. Twice they were forced to find alternate routes when corridors collapsed ahead of them. The air grew thick with toxic particles as filtration systems failed across multiple sectors. "How much farther?" Amara asked, checking her dwindling oxygen supply. "2 sections," Kayla answered, her natural adaptations allowing her to process the contaminated atmosphere. The communication hub serves as a backup command center during emergencies. When they finally reached the hub, they found it abandoned. The corporate technicians had prioritized their own evacuation over station protocols. Ellis collapsed into the primary control seat, his fingers moving weakly across unfamiliar interfaces. "The system's locked down," he murmured, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Multiple authentication required." Kayla stepped forward. "I can help." Over the past months of resistance work, she had memorized override codes from various supervisors, capturing retinal patterns and voice prints through Ellis's recording devices. One by one, she provided these stolen authentications until the system accepted their command authority. "Attention, all workers," Ellis broadcast, his voice strengthened by urgency despite his injuries. "This is Ellis Ramirez. Station management has abandoned you to die. The reactor will reach critical failure within 2 hours. All evacuation protocols have been overridden. Proceed immediately to emergency transport bays on levels 2, 5, and 7. Earth vessels are standing by for rescue operations." He switched to a different channel. "Captain Lin, we've unlocked the station's evacuation systems. Workers are proceeding to transport bays, but there aren't enough escape vessels for everyone." "Understood," Lin's voice replied through static. "The equitable measure is moving into docking position at the main hub. We've also received confirmation that 7 Earth vessels have diverted to your location. ETA 23 minutes. Hold position if possible." Throughout the station, the resistance network sprang into action. Moore led 300 workers to Transport Bay 5, using his fluid technician expertise to override the remaining security locks. The Velian brothers guided another group through waste reclamation tunnels to reach a service dock with maintenance shuttles. On level 8, chaos threatened as panicked workers fought to reach limited escape pods. Automated security systems, still following abandoned protocols, attempted to prevent unauthorized departures. "The drones are attacking workers in Section 12, Ellis reported, monitoring security feeds. "We need to shut them down." "Impossible from here," Amara stated, after attempting to access drone controls. "They're on an isolated system." Kyla studied the station schematics displayed across the command center's monitors. "There is another way," she said quietly. "The central power distribution node for Section 12 can be manually disabled." Ellis looked up sharply. "That section is already experiencing critical radiation leaks. Anyone entering would receive a lethal dose within minutes." "My species can withstand higher levels than most," Kyla replied simply. "Not those levels," Ellis protested. not for the time needed to reach the distribution node. My children need me alive, Kayla acknowledged, her inner heart pulsing with emotion her translator couldn't convey. But these workers need me now. Before either human could respond, the station lurched violently as another explosion tore through a lower level. Warning indicators flashed across every monitor, structural integrity failing in multiple sectors, atmospheric pressure dropping throughout the habitation zones, radiation containment breaching in 27 locations. "We're out of time," Amara stated, checking her tactical display. "The first Earth vessels are arriving, but they can't dock if the station's breaking apart around them." Ellis reached for Kayla's manipulator limb, grasping it with surprising strength for his injured state. "We go together," he insisted. "The distribution node has dual control requirements anyway." They left Amara coordinating evacuation efforts from the command center and made their way to Section 12 through maintenance passages now filling with smoke and debris. Ellis's breathing grew increasingly labored as they encountered pockets of toxic gas. Carla supported his weight when he stumbled, her stronger frame compensating for his weakening condition. They reached the power distribution node just as another tremor shook the station. Through observation windows, they could see the chaos in the main corridor, workers fleeing toward evacuation points, while security drones methodically blocked their path, following final orders from absent masters. "The controls require simultaneous activation," Ellis confirmed, examining the emergency shutdown system. "Radiation levels are already at harmful exposure for humans." Kayla's translator remained silent for several moments before she responded. "Then I will complete the task alone." Before Ellis could protest, she guided him to a relatively protected alcove. "Your evidence must reach your world," she reminded him. "My children must know what happened here." The power distribution chamber beyond the control room glowed with ominous blue light, the visible manifestation of radiation levels that would kill most species within moments. Carla's natural shielding would provide limited protection, but nowhere near enough for prolonged exposure. "The shutdown requires both control stations to be activated within 5 seconds of each other," Ellis explained, his voice breaking. "It's impossible for one person." Kayla regarded him silently, before extending all 4 of her manipulator limbs to their full reach. "Mirans evolved as climbers," she stated simply. "Our limbs can operate independently." Understanding dawned in Ellis's eyes. "You'll stretch between both stations." "Yes, the radiation will do what it must," she finished. "As will I." Ellis struggled to his feet, swaying dangerously. "Then I'll hold the door. Once the shutdown initiates, you'll have 17 seconds to exit before emergency seals engage." The next moments passed in desperate activity. Carla positioned herself at the chamber entrance, while Ellis overrode the safety protocols. As the massive doors slid open, a wave of radiation washed over them both. Ellis fell back, shielding his face as Carla moved forward into the deadly blue glow. Stretching her body to its physiological limits, she extended her manipulator limbs toward the control stations positioned on opposite sides of the chamber. The pain was immediate and overwhelming as radiation penetrated her protective membranes. Her translator emitted an involuntary keen of agony that it couldn't properly interpret into standard language. Through blurring vision, she saw her limbs reach the control surfaces. With one final surge of desperate strength, she pressed all 4 activation points simultaneously. The blue glow died instantly as power cut to the entire section. Emergency lighting activated, casting the chamber in dim red illumination. In the corridor beyond, the security drones dropped lifeless to the deck, their control signals severed. "Kayla!" Ellis's voice seemed to come from very far away. 17 seconds, move!" Her body refused to respond properly, limbs contracting spasmodically as radiation damage affected her nervous system. The chamber doors were beginning to close, automatic safety protocols engaging to contain the residual radiation. With her remaining strength, Kayla propelled herself toward the narrowing exit. She felt hands grasping her, pulling her through the gap as the massive doors sealed behind her with a final, definitive thud. Ellis collapsed beside her in the corridor, his own injuries compounded by radiation exposure. Through the station's viewport, Kayla could see Earth vessels maneuvering alongside Vorex station, extending docking tubes to evacuate the remaining workers. "Did we succeed?" she asked, her translator struggling to function as her systems began shutting down. Ellis's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Yes. Look." Through the corridor windows, she could see hundreds of workers streaming toward the newly arrived rescue vessels. Security barriers deactivated, escape pods launching, salvation. Arriving after generations of exploitation. "Your children," Ellis whispered. "I promise." Darkness crept at the edges of Kyla's consciousness as her body fought to repair catastrophic damage. The last thing she saw before awareness faded was a rescue team in Earth uniforms rushing toward them, medical equipment in hand, urgent voices calling for emergency treatment. In her final thoughts before unconsciousness claimed her, Carla returned to Myron 3, to her children waiting beneath the crimson evening sky, still believing in a promise she had made that she would return to them someday. Against all odds, it seemed that promise might yet be kept. Morning sunlight painted Myron 3's capital city in shades of amber and gold, highlighting the architectural transformation that had occurred over the past 16 months. Where once stood utilitarian habitation blocks, designed for maximum occupancy, with minimum resources, new structures incorporated both function and beauty, a philosophy the Mirans had nearly forgotten during generations of bare survival. At the center of the governmental plaza, a new building rose higher than the others, its design unique among Miran constructions. Curved transparent panels allowed sunlight to penetrate deep within, while environmental systems maintained the perfect balance of humidity and atmospheric composition preferred by Miran physiology. The Earth Embassy, as it was called, represented more than just diplomatic presence. It stood as physical proof of a fundamental shift in the galactic order, a reminder that change, while difficult and costly, remained possible. Inside the embassy's medical wing, Kayla floated in a regeneration chamber, her body suspended in nutrient-rich solution, specially formulated for Miran healing requirements. 16 months had passed since her evacuation from the disintegrating Vorex station, and 14 of those months had been spent in various stages of medical recovery. The radiation damage had been catastrophic, far beyond what even her species' legendary resilience could overcome without intervention. Her inner heart had nearly failed 3 times during the initial treatments. 2 of her 4 manipulator limbs had required complete reconstruction, using experimental techniques developed through human-Miran medical cooperation. Through it all, Ellis had remained by her side, first as a fellow patient recovering from his own injuries, then as an advocate ensuring she received the most advanced treatment available. His position as key witness in the Galactic investigation into Vorex Corporation gave him substantial influence, which he leveraged relentlessly on behalf of all rescued workers. Today marked a milestone Carla had imagined countless times during her darkest moments on the station. Today she would finally see her children again. The regeneration fluid drained slowly from the chamber as medical technicians monitored her vital signs. When the transparent door opened, Ellis was waiting, supported by a mobility assistance device, his own recovery still ongoing. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Kayla tested her reconstructed limbs, marveling at how natural they felt despite being partly synthetic now. "My appearance, will it frighten them?" Ellis shook his head. "They've seen images, been prepared. They just want their mother back." The journey to the reunion chamber took them through corridors where humans and Mirans worked side by side. The aftermath of Vorex Station had catalyzed an unprecedented alliance between the species. Earth's powerful stance against labor exploitation had elevated Myron 3's status in galactic politics, while Miran resilience and adaptability had proven invaluable to human expansion efforts. "The evidence file you transmitted changed everything," Ellis explained as they walked. 17 major corporations have been forced to restructure their labor practices. 8 station administrators face criminal charges. The Galactic Council has implemented new inspection protocols with actual enforcement mechanisms. "And my children?" Kayla asked, focusing on what mattered most to her. "Thriving," Ellis assured her, Teth has been accepted to the joint education program. The twins are learning standard faster than their instructors can keep up. They paused outside the reunion chamber door. Kyla's translator emitted the subtle harmonic that represented anxiety in her native language. Ellis placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a human gesture of reassurance she had come to understand. "They've waited so long," he reminded her. Inside, 3 young Mirrans stood with ceremonial posture, clearly coached on proper diplomatic protocol. For one heartbeat, they maintained this formal stance. Then Wren spotted her mother and formality shattered. "Mother!" The translator couldn't fully capture the emotional resonance of their native speech as all 3 offspring rushed forward. Kyla dropped to their level, extending her manipulator limbs to embrace them simultaneously. Their family scent markings mingled, triggering biological recognition that transcended their physical changes. Teth, now nearly adult height, touched his forehead crest to hers. "I was preparing to search for you," he said solemnly. "As I promised." She found her own way back, Ellis commented from the doorway, giving the family space for their reunion. With a little help. The twins examined Kayla's reconstructed limbs with characteristic curiosity rather than fear. "The humans fixed you," Pal observed. "Are you different now?" "Only stronger," Kayla assured them, her inner heart pulsing with joy her translator couldn't adequately convey. Later, as her children showed her the dwelling they now shared, a spacious habitation provided by the resettlement program, Carla stood at the viewport overlooking the capital city. Ellis joined her there, his own recovery progress evident in his steadier gait. "The Galactic Rights Coalition representatives arrive tomorrow," he reminded her gently. "They're eager to hear your testimony." Kayla's translator remained silent for several moments before she responded. "Psi experience is just one among thousands. But your voice carries weight now," Ellis countered. "The Coalition needs a representative who understands both what was and what could be." Beyond the viewport, the evening sky of Myron 3 burned, crimson, just as it had the day she left. But where that sunset had represented an ending, this one promised a beginning. "When I signed that contract," Kyla said quietly, "I believed I was sacrificing myself to save my children. I never imagined—" "That you would change the galaxy instead," Ellis suggested. "That anyone would see us as worth saving," she corrected. "My species had accepted our place at the bottom of the order. We believed it immutable law." Ellis smiled, an expression Carla now understood perfectly. "Humans have a long history of rejecting immutable laws when they prove unjust." "Your stubborn defiance," Kayla observed, her translator adding harmonic undertones of affection to the words. "Our greatest flaw," Ellis acknowledged with a nod to their long-ago conversation, "and perhaps our greatest gift to the galaxy." The formal ceremony the following day brought dignitaries from 17 worlds to Myron 3, a planet previously considered too insignificant for such attention. The Galactic Rights Coalition, formed in the aftermath of the Vorex Station incident, had chosen this location deliberately for its symbolic importance. Kayla stood before the assembled representatives, her children seated proudly in the front row, Ellis standing supportively at her side. Her translator had been specially calibrated to capture the subtle emotional resonances of her native speech. "I left this world believing I had no choice," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I sold myself across the stars because I saw no alternative. In doing so, I accepted a truth that wasn't true, that some beings exist to serve while others exist to rule." She extended her reconstructed limbs, evidence of both trauma and healing visible in their synthetic components. "What I discovered instead was that lines drawn between species are as artificial as these replacement limbs. The true division lies not between human and Miran, not between ancient galactic powers and newcomers, but between those who view sentient beings as resources to exploit and those who recognize the inherent dignity in all thinking creatures." Throughout, the chamber translation devices rendered her words into dozens of languages. Representatives from worlds that had never before acknowledged Miran existence now listened with rapt attention. "The humans have a concept they call redemption," Kayla continued. "It means to be rescued from a terrible fate, to be purchased back from bondage, to be restored to wholeness. When Ellis Ramirez risked everything to document our suffering, when Captain Linadira defied diplomatic protocol to save thousands, when Earth vessels evacuated workers other species had abandoned. They demonstrated this redemption not through words, but through actions. She paused, her inner heart swelling, with emotion that her translator rendered as a musical harmony underlying her speech. Today I stand before you not as Unit 4729, not as an expendable resource, but as Carla of Clan Veris, mother of 3, citizen of Miron 3, and proposed representative to this coalition. I stand as living testimony that no sentient being is beyond redemption, that no system of exploitation is too entrenched to challenge, that no division between thinking creatures need be permanent. As the assembly rose in unprecedented unanimous approval of her appointment, Carla felt the weight of countless cycles of suffering begin to lift. Her children watched with pride as their mother, once sold across the stars in desperation, now helped chart a new course for the Galaxy's future. And beside her stood Ellis, whose compassion had indeed loved her back to life, not through romantic attachment as ancient human stories might have portrayed, but through something perhaps more profound, the recognition of shared personhood across the boundaries of biology and origin. Together they had discovered what humans had brought to the galactic community and what Mirans had almost forgotten, that dignity was not bestowed by cosmic position or evolutionary age, but was inherent in consciousness itself, that no being who could conceive of freedom deserved bondage, that resistance to injustice, even when seemingly futile, carried the seeds of redemption. As evening fell once more on Miron 3, Carla stood with her children and Ellis on the observation platform of their dwelling, watching distant ships ascending toward the stars, not carrying desperate workers to exploitation, but bearing representatives of a new coalition founded on principles that had once seemed impossibly idealistic. "Will you tell us again, Mother?" Wren asked, her young voice full of wonder. "About how you and Ellis changed everything?" Kayla's translator hummed, with the gentle harmonics of maternal affection. "It wasn't just us," she corrected softly. "It was thousands of acts of courage, thousands of beings who chose dignity over safety." "But it started with you," Teth insisted with youthful certainty. Ellis shook his head, smiling at the young Myran. "It started with a simple truth that every human child learns, that personhood is not measured by power or position, but by the capacity to think and feel and choose. And to love," Kayla added, her inner heart pulsing with contentment as her family gathered around her, beneath the crimson evening sky of a world no longer at the bottom of any hierarchy, but standing as equal among the stars.